And hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle. I am your host, Mushtaq Ali Al-Ansari, and
I'm Noor Kyle, your other host tonight, and every night that we do the show.
Yes. So, let me welcome you and say that we're going to have a lot of fun this evening talking about a subject that is, I consider it quite interesting. But before we do, let me suggest to you that you would really benefit from, if you are listening to this on YouTube, hitting that old subscribe button down there. Because if you subscribe to this channel and you hit the notification bell, then you will know every time we upload something to the channel, which is admittedly incredibly exciting. And
considering we just hit 100 subscribers.
Yes, we're now up to 101, which is
oh my gosh.
Even,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hardly stand it. So thank you to everybody who has subscribed. And I would like to suggest to all of you, and there will be a link down below in the description of how you can sign up for our mailing list if you'd like, because then you will be sure to get an invitation to join us live every Sunday, because we like to have you actually participate in this. Participation is more fun than just us talking at somebody. So if you are new to the channel and you would like to actually join us live for a talk, sign up on the mailing list and you will get an invitation. And then you can actually be one of the people who we converse with when we do this, which would be great.
We want you here. We want more participants. We really enjoy that. And it definitely makes this whole thing worthwhile. So.
Yeah. And your questions mean something to us.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oftentimes the best way to answer those questions is doing this.
Age-old way of learning things, really.
Age-old.
So
tonight we are going to talk about what is known as the Method of Loci. Loci from the Greek, or the Latin, excuse me. Loci from the Latin, which is the plural of locus, which means place. So the method of places. This is also known as the memory palace. And most people know that, if they do know it at all, from Sherlock Holmes, especially if you've watched the Benjamin Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes series, which I highly recommend. It's great fun. But Sherlock in the series uses Memory Palace to store all of his clues for solving his crimes. So, the Greeks probably invented this. The Romans certainly used it. Cicero talks about it in one of his dialogues, and a couple of the other big Roman eggheads talk about it. It was an incredibly important thing before the invention of the printing press, and universities taught the Memory Palace as an essential class, because at a time where a single book could cost you as much as a home, scholars didn't have a whole big library of things that they could look up. If you wanted to have information, you had to carry it around with you in your head. And the Method of Loci makes use of some interesting things that your brain does. So, when you store things visually in your brain, you also store them spatially. So let's all try an experiment. I want you all to think of the outside of your house when you were a child. And notice that once you find it, you'll notice that it is in a place. It might be kind of up here, it might be over here, it could be behind you for all you know. but we store our visual memories spatially around us. And so spatial memory and visual memory tend to be connected. And the memory palace makes use of this in order to allow us to store information in a very, very easy, useful way. And it also allows us to take things from short-term memory into long-term memory. Short-term memory is chemical, right? Your neurons fire off some chemistry between the synapses, and that is your short-term memory. When that clears up, if you haven't brought it into long-term memory, you're going to forget it. I'm being really simplistic here. It's much more complicated than this, but I don't want to spend hours going into all of the brain chemistry and all of that kind of stuff. I'm going to gloss over a lot of stuff. And for anybody who's interested, if you make a comment below, I can dig up some links for you to read some stuff on how it all works. So long-term memory is structural. We build new synapses, new dendrites and axons and connections between brain cells. And that's more or less, again, very simplistically, how we create long-term memory is by changing the structure of our brain in a certain way. And that's very plastic. If those structures are not used, they get recycled. So back in the Middle Ages, if you wanted to be a doctor, you could not just go to your pharmacopoeia and open it up and read about a herb for a particular condition, because you didn't have a pharmacopoeia. If you were lucky, there was a pharmacopoeia at the university where you studied, and you might have been allowed to read it, or it would have been read aloud to you. So no physician's desk references.
It is hard to imagine.
Yeah.
So I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, in the days of being able to Google so many things, it is very humbling to imagine not having access to these references. Yeah.
Yep.
So this stuff would have been extremely important.
Yep, and it is still used to this day in some cultures. For instance, in Apache culture, the land upon which you live has stories associated with every landmark, with every large rock, with every valley, with every canyon, with every dry stream bed. There are stories associated with that. Coyote did this right here on this spot. And so the entire land upon which you live becomes a kind of memory palace. Once we got printing presses and cheap paper and pen, taking notes was not a thing in the Middle Ages, because you had to take notes on something, and that something was expensive. If you took notes on, there was no paper to speak of.
Do they have wax tablets?
They had wax tablets.
That's very temporary.
Yeah, that's very temporary. They had chalkboards, a piece of slate and some chalk. That's very temporary.
Mm-hmm. What about clay tablets?
Clay tablets, not so much. Not in the Middle Ages.
Mm-hmm.
Wax, the Romans used wax a lot. because you can write on it and then you can heat it up and smooth it out and just keep reusing it. Same with a piece of slate and a chalk. And so that's useful for writing things down to put in your memory palace, but it's not permanent. Paper was very expensive when you could get it. Most of the stuff in the Middle Ages that was written down on either vellum or parchment. Vellum is made from calf skin and parchment is made from goat skin. And that means that you only get a certain amount of writing material out of one goat. And goats aren't that big. Right? So you get maybe 4 pages, 5 pages of decent parchment out of a goat. So you needed a lot of dead goats in order to write a book. So there had to be a method of storing information that you could then re-access. And if you couldn't, then it was lost to you and you were kind of useless. But back then, people also had memories. Writing and reading destroy memory because you don't need to struggle to remember something. You don't need to put something in long-term memory if you can just go to the book and read it again. So we have lost our ability to remember things accurately and well and recover that knowledge as needed. Because, most of us carry a device with us that has access to the entire sum of human knowledge, which is kind of weird to think about.
Yeah. Understatement. It's extremely weird to think about when we put it in this light of how new that technology is.
Yeah. I mean, we've had the printing press since Gutenberg, which was, what, 600 years ago?
I think so.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah.
Ish. And before that, for the entirety of human history and prehistory, we had to carry our knowledge in our skulls.
If you'll excuse a nitpick, there's a lot of information that has not been put online.
Oh yeah, it's true. And there's a lot more that has been put online in languages that you don't speak.
That too.
Yeah.
So, how does the memory palace work? And the answer is it's really quite simple. What you need is you need a room that has an entrance. This is the general how to do a memory palace. And the room can be like a house, like that house that you grew up in. You imagine it. There's the house. And there's the door. And you walk through the door, and there are things in the house. The house is furnished in a particular way. And it's furnished in a way that you can walk through the room. And there are various things. Like there might be a chair, there might be a table, there might be a couch, there might be a clock on the wall. And you create a path through this room that you follow every time you enter it. And you follow it the same way. And then, as you need to, you associate things you want to remember with objects that are in the room. So, I walk into the room and there's a table sitting right by the front door, right by the door. And I put my keys on that table and I associate that with where I've put my keys in reality. And then I walk to the next thing, a couch. And on the couch, I put a cassava melon. And that cassava melon is the recipe for what I'm going to cook for dinner tonight. And so on and so forth. And then you visit the room every day and you reinforce it in your mind every day by walking through it in the same pattern, seeing what's already there. So you go, oh, keys are there. Oh, here's that recipe that I'm going to use to cook. You know, oh, here's that essay that I'm going to write. Here's the information I need from that. And that's sitting over here on this dining room table. All of that sort of thing. And over time, your room gets more and more real. And you're used to associating stuff with what you have there. I know the Greeks would, in their room, or the Romans, I forget, Greeks or Romans, one of those guys, they would have like busts of certain philosophers. So you go in and there's a bust of Plato. And you associate, Platonic philosophy with that. Over here is Aristotle, and you associate the Aristotelian logic with that. Things like that. So basically, that's how you build a mind palace in the general sense. And it can be as simple or as elaborate as you want it to be. The place that you go into can have many different rooms. And interestingly, you can have more than one mind palace, which gets us to the Sufi method of the mind palace. So this is the method as I learned it. It's called the 5 libraries. Or in Arabic, khamsu mukitabin. Khamsu means 5, khams is 5, mukitab is library, kitab means book. The 5 libraries. And you are taught to construct a space with 5 buildings in it. Mine looks like a bowl valley, what we call a rincon in the Southwest. And in that, there are these 5 buildings, and they sit in a pentagram. Now, each of the buildings is associated with an element. So you have fire and water and earth and air and space or void or spirit, however you want to call it. Each of the buildings has the colors of the element that are associated with it. So the earth building is in browns, the fire building is in reds and yellows, the water building is in greens and grays, the sky building is in blues and whites, the void building is in violets and purples. And depending on what you want to store, you look at something and you go, oh, this is related to the fire element. So I am going to put it in the fire library. This is related to the water element. Let's say this has to do with emotional health. Water, emotions, they all go together. You know, you got this doctrine of correspondences that everybody understands. And so whatever you need to store, you figure out what its elementary base is, and that's where you put it. That's the building that you put it in. Now, the building itself can be one or many rooms, but there's a particular way that the rooms are organized with objects. Each library has a number of objects in it, and they are arranged using what's called the Abjadiyya method. Abjad means alphabet in Arabic. And that means that you start with alif and you work your way around. And traditionally in the Sufi library, you go counterclockwise. If I was making a Native American library, I'd go clockwise. But this is the Sufi library. So if I were to walk into my fire library, the first thing that I would see is a red bronze statue of a lion. In Arabic, a lion is called Asad. And it starts with the letter Alif, first letter of the Arabic alphabet. And so here's my statue of a bronze lion. Greeting me is the first object in the fire library. And then as you walk through the room, following the specific path that you follow, you go from the alif to the bay, the dal, all the way through the alphabet. Now, the thing is, you don't have to use Arabic for this. If I was Zainab, I would do this in Farsi, and it would work exactly as well. If I were Noor, I would do it in English, and it would work exactly as well. And for Nancy, if you got wild and crazy, you could do it in Hebrew, especially if you use the old Hebrew 22-letter alphabet.
English is my home language, though.
Yeah, so you'd probably use English like me, but.
Yeah, I wish I could have used English, but my teacher insisted that I do it in Arabic. Yeah. So, you go through and you arrange each of the rooms for that, and you find objects going from A to Z. There are not a lot of Z objects, by the way, if you're doing this in English, but there are a few. And you can do it in different languages.
Different rooms for different languages?
Yep. Like I installed in my earth room a few years back a zambarao bush.
Mm.
Zambarao means purple in Kiswahili. And it produces a small purple fruit. But it starts with Z.
Are they yummy fruits?
They can be. They're a little stringent. But they make a really good drink.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So the idea with this kind of library, with the 5 libraries, is that you build them over time. They are never not under construction. You add rooms to them as are necessary to store more stuff, and each room follows the same pattern. So your mind gets really used to using this pattern for storing information, because minds like patterns. And then in the Sufi libraries, there are special rooms. And these are rooms where you learn things. And they're rooms where you can actually evoke teachers of the past and learn from them. And I'm not going to go into too much detail in that because most people will never need that. And it's an initiatory thing anyway. But I figured I needed to mention it since I'm giving away all of the secrets.
May as well give a couple extras away, right?
Yeah, might as well. So that's basically how the Mind Palace works. Now, when you are putting things in the Mind Palace, the best way I know of to do it is you write the thing down that you want to go in the Mind Palace first. This is where that slate chalkboard comes in handy, or the beeswax. You write it out. And then you can carry that into your Mind Palace and arrange it at the proper place. I mean, I know people who actually have pieces of slate sitting all over their Mind Palaces with different things written on them, because that was the easiest way for them to do that. I don't do that way myself. I will write something out on a piece of paper, and so that I have it as a statement, and then I will craft an object that goes with that statement. So if I want to have a recipe for a particular food, like I keep my recipe for my mung bean curry in my Mind Palace. And when I go there, that is in my my fire library, because it's cooking, so heat, fire, transformation. So I go there and I go to this place, and there is an actual bowl of the curry sitting there. And so every time I see that, I remember the recipe. I remember exactly how it's made, because that's the association that goes with it. And it's easier to remember that when you have written it out.
So you do write it down initially.
Yes.
And
You
then
write it out so you have a concise statement.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because I was thinking about, you know, the idea of having a bust of Plato and then looking at that bust and remembering all of your Platonic content, right?
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, how does that come to be? Because, I mean, that's a lot of stuff, right? So it's not like you're looking at a bowl of curry, let's say.
Yeah.
It
The
brings up
way
the
that
recipe.
you remember the stuff is that you have a lot of objects sitting around the bust of Plato.
Okay. Yeah. That's just your shrine to Plato, as it were.
Yeah. So I might have a dodecahedron sitting there. And that would be my reminder for the Platonic solids.
Okay.
And I might have, what do I have there? I have a chair.
Oh, yeah?
A small chair sitting in my personal Plato section, which is in this is in the air library, because it's thought. Air is thought. And so I have a small chair that is a perfect chair to remind me of the Platonic archetypes. You know, things like that.
And then you look at your array and you see all of the objects in front of you.
Yeah. And if I go over to Aristotle, I have, I actually have beads strung on strings, and they're different colors. And there are, like, I think 24 of them now. and they represent one. Each one represents a syllogism. And that's how I remember all of the syllogisms, because there's a lot of syllogisms and they're incredibly boring to remember. And so I did it with beads.
Are they specific colors? Like what makes each bead each bead?
Each bead is a color for yes or no, positive or negative. So like Socrates is a man, that's a positive statement.
Mm-hmm.
All men are mortal, that's a positive statement. And then the conclusion statement is blue, for instance. And so the conclusion statement is a different color. Therefore, Socrates is mortal.
Okay. So you've visualized this long enough and hard enough that it is as if it were a tangible object with colors on it and everything.
Yeah. Well, you know how my powers of visualization are. They didn't get that way by accident.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So how long, I mean, I think you have a lifetime of skill set up for this.
Yeah, I've been doing this. I learned this in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm. How long does it take you to solidify an object like that?
5 minutes.
Okay. So for someone else, though, it might take more time.
Yeah. This is all about practice.
Mm-hmm.
The more you practice, the easier it gets. And I'm not as good at it as some people who do stuff all the time. There are people who can memorize the order of a deck of cards within seconds using this methodology. And then an hour later, read that order back to you, and you check and find that they're exactly right.
I'm just wondering, so this is when we take time to sit and do this, writing it out, envisioning, sitting with what we're envisioning and honing it. But I mean, when it comes to, say, listening to a lecture in the forum or whatever.
Yeah, so you do the same sort of thing and I used to do this in class when I was especially when I was in graduate school. College and graduate school were very frustrating for some of my teachers because I never took notes.
You were that guy, huh?
I was that guy. I never took notes. And I had a couple of teachers challenge me on this. And then I would repeat back to them verbatim what they had said for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah. So I mean, when it's rapid fire like that, like you can't sit and think about it. It just has to
yeah, it becomes reflexive. And so if I'm listening to a lecture, I'm actually seeing the guy lecture in the place where he is, and I'm hearing his voice. And so I still have my visual, my spatial, and I've added the auditory. And so I just play it back. He says, I literally go back 5 minutes, and I'm noticing things about him as he's going to mark time. This is not full-on memory palace. This is more like the memory sphere.
Okay.
The thing that I demonstrated earlier, that the idea that you remember things in various different places around you in space.
Right. Yeah.
For your visual memory.
So you just locate it in your sphere and watch it back a little bit.
After the class, I can move it into my memory palace.
I was going to ask, where's the connection there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's say, I guess it depends on the content, right?
Yeah.
So when you are translating that into a memory palace object or memory, how do you start categorizing a lecture? How do you start figuring out how to conceptualize that as an object?
Okay, that's going to be in my air library most of the time. And it's actually going to usually be a photograph or a statue of the instructor in the classroom, oftentimes with a date in the picture.
Yeah, I mean, because I was wondering, this is someone you're seeing on a regular basis too.
Yeah.
So it's same as with the busted Play-Doh, you're not attaching everything directly to that busted Play-Doh, I assume.
Nope. You have, for instance, my philosophy professor, Dr. Kostenbaum. I have a particular picture of him that I have sitting in my memory palace. And in front of it, like an altar, are the various things that remind me of his lessons. So there is, within his master work, The New Image of the Person, he talks about the 3 philosophical facts. And those philosophical facts are human beings can be modeled as individuals. And that means that they have certain characteristics and traits that individuals have, including anxiety and a sense for meaning and all of this kind of stuff. And they can be modeled as universal. And that means that they have this interconnectedness with all life and all of this sort of thing. And each of these are poles. The third philosophical fact is that the human being, the person, can move either in between both of these to be both individual and universal, or can hold both at the same time. The way I access this entire body of knowledge is sitting in front of Dr. Kostenbaum's picture is a yin-yang symbol. I look at that and go, oh yeah, all of this. There's probably 20 hours of material I could talk about just from looking at that symbol.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah. And so that's how that one works.
So how did you come to associate a yin-yang symbol with that material?
Because the yin and yang basically gives me that whole idea of the individual and the universal, the polarities. And then when you put the symbol together, you get the Tai Chi. That's what the symbol is called, Tai Chi, the grand ultimate, the whole thing.
Cool.
Third force, as it were.
Does anybody else have any questions? I don't want to hog all the dialogue time.
Okay, how about something that's a bit less sensory, like you're reading a Platonic dialogue in a book? Do you just store the pages, or what do you do?
I usually create objects.
Okay.
The object could actually be the book, if it needs to be. Zainab, I learned this in Iran, so you must have a question or two.
That's interesting. So the object can be a symbol as well, like the yin yang symbol.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the object wants to be a symbol.
But it needs to be like a tangible object, right? Like
it really, really helps.
Yeah. So it can be the symbol, but like in like a molded shape. Like a talisman or a token kind of thing.
So I can play the entirety, note for note, of Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor in my head. And within the this is in my fire library, because fire is energy and spirit and all of that kind of stuff. And so is Bach. And I have a miniature organ, and I look at that, and every time I look at that, I hear the first chords, the first notes of the Toccata and Fugue, and that starts it off in my head, and I can play the entire thing.
Wow.
And not miss a note. And now here's a fun thing. and this is something that I installed more recently, is within my fire library is a room full of musical instruments. And so if I want to hear the toccata and fugue played on a cello, there's a little cello, and I just touch the cello, and it transposes from pipe organ to cello.
Are you playing it, or is it kind of playing itself?
It's playing itself. I'm not playing it.
Yeah.
But with any instrument in the room, and they're instruments that I know fairly intimately. Mm-hmm. The funniest one is playing toccata and fugue on a Turkish ney.
Oh my gosh. Fun experiments. So yeah. Actually that touches on something else. I would think that feels like a whole other topic, but I was just having the thought that means in some ways you can play with the objects that you put in your space.
Yes. That's how you get creative.
Yeah.
If it was just memory, that's one thing. And that's what most people use it for, is just memory. Mm-hmm. I want to memorize stuff. But this last little bit shows you that you can alter the memories. You can create as well as remember. And my music room is one of those special rooms that I was talking about. And there are several other special rooms that can be built.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. It takes a lot of practice to do it. This is not something that you can do in 5 minutes. It actually takes work. And that's somewhere in my notes, it says, this is what you do instead of running through Facebook on your phone when you're sitting on the bus.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that's literally, if I'm on the bus by myself or riding on the train or anything like that, going from place to place, I am often going through my memory palace. I'm oftentimes going through the libraries and just, tidying up, cleaning, dusting, washing the floors, whatever needs to be done.
Cool. Yeah, I can only imagine all the crazy stuff people end up with.
Oh, yeah. Remember, every great thinker at one time probably used this process or one very, very similar to store their knowledge. This is not to say that I'm a great thinker, but, I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah. Yep.
The demonstration of my memory. Have we had a lecture about attention?
Probably.
I'm sure we have.
Because I'm thinking you can't remember a thing you didn't notice in the first place.
That's true. So if you go back and you listen to my lecture on attention, intention, and presence, mm-hmm. You will find some stuff on how to develop attention.
Okay.
Which is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me that I now must build a room in one of my libraries that stores everything that are on all of these lectures.
And also I was thinking that there's a thing you can do on YouTube, I don't know how, where you can include an image of another video in the video.
Yeah.
So, you could have related videos.
Or like, yep. This is where that video is. Yeah.
Yep. You can do that stuff. Mm-hmm. I actually learned how at one point. I just I haven't done it for most of them.
Yeah.
There are a few I have. But yeah, I should do that with this one.
What are you thinking about, Zainab?
I was actually thinking it already brings a lot of like visualization. Like, I would like to have a room maybe with all the lectures, have a room where, I don't know, there's just a tree and branches on the wall, and then there's different fruits, and every fruit can have one of the lectures.
Ooh.
So
You,
remember,
as an artist, could have so much fun with this.
Yep.
so what is the earth element related?
Earth element is things physical and tangible. For instance, I keep all of my exercises in the earth element, in the earth library. So if I want to go, oh, I need an exercise that will work my transverse abdominis, I go in there, and there are a series of figurines. They're Egyptian, and they're in various positions. And each of the positions that each of these figurines are in reminds me of a specific exercise. So there is a figurine sitting there that is in the bird dog position, which is hands and knees with one arm straight out and the opposite leg straight back. And that is an exercise that you do to strengthen the transverse abdominis. Voila.
There you go.
So I'm going to encourage you to play with this, Zainab. And there is no rule that says you can't actually draw out or paint out your libraries or your palace, on paper or canvas. That would actually probably be an incredibly cool thing to do.
I was actually thinking about for people who are able to render 3D objects on the computer.
Yeah.
They could, I mean, because it's for people who are raised playing video games and stuff, it kind of feels like that, you know?
Yeah, well, I worked for a while actually doing 3D renderings for a company, and my ability to visualize this like this was what allowed me to be good at that job.
Yeah.
Because you are visualizing in 3 dimensions, not in 2.
Right. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about like rummaging through like a sorcerer's room in Skyrim or something, and then there's all these objects to just like rummage through, and you can sit there and read a book or whatever. That's kind of what is at least initially coming to my mind. But I think that we can make it much more creative and individual without even having to externalize it in that way. Yeah. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
And so this is just a tool.
Yep. Much better than trying to like just read notes over and over again and like cram it all in there without any kind of anchoring stuff to keep it nailed down, so to speak. So do we have anything else we need to impart about the Mind Palace, the Memory Palace?
Let me check my notes real quick. No, basically, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot to chew on already.
Here's a question.
Go for it.
Is there a way to use the memory palace to get spontaneous memory, for example, of things you need to do?
You mean set an alarm in your memory palace?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So how would you do that? If you had a memory palace and you needed to set an alarm,
I actually have a pretty good sense of duration. So I might put the thing I need to remember next to a chart of the hours. And it might pop, there's a reasonable chance it would pop into my mind at the right time.
okay, what could you do to build a symbol that would pop into your mind of what you need to do? Let's say you need to check your laundry.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could just use the washing machine.
Okay. And then you need something to signify duration. For me, I use an hourglass.
Mm-hmm.
I just turn it over and go, oh, this is 4 hours before the sand runs out.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking maybe going a little further into the future, like I need to do something at noon the next day.
Mm-hmm. You can
So
have a
possibly,
24-hour hourglass.
yeah.
I mean, it's your imagination. Your hourglass can work as any way you want.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a big hourglass. It can be a tiny hourglass.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be an hourglass. It can be an old-fashioned alarm clock, with the 2 little bells on the top.
Right.
And so what you do, I can't tell you exactly how to do it. I can tell you to experiment with it and find what works.
I think it's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something that feels good about the colored rooms and the alphabets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Sufi, stealing stuff from everybody and making it more fun.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, has it always been a thing to have like associations with the different elements and stuff like that? I guess it has been. That's fairly universal.
I mean, that's like it's called the law of correspondences.
Yeah.
And in the old archaeological things, before we had scientific stuff, we had the other things, and law of correspondence was how you understood that things related to things.
Yeah.
So there were a whole group of things that corresponded to an astrological sign, or to an element, or to a planet, or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So if I were a magician doing a ceremony, and the ceremony had to do with evoking the powers of Earth, I would have all of these things that symbolized Earth.
Can you do a ceremony in your mind that way?
Shh. Shh. Gee, there might be a special room for that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Could be a thing.
Could be a thing.
Yeah, this is a fun topic. I'm glad we got into this today.
Yeah, I like it. It's practical as well as being weird and metaphysical at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like this is a good way to lead into the new year in a lot of ways too.
Yeah. So I want you all, whether you are watching this on replay or listening to it live, to build yourself at least a small memory room and comment about what it looks like in the comments below. I'm really very interested in seeing all of the different ways that this can be done. And there is no wrong way to do this. There is your way, which is the right way. No matter how you are moved to do it, that's the right way for you.
Yeah, because it has to work for you specifically.
Yep.
As an individual, whatever speaks to you, whatever gets it done for you.
Exactly right.
Awesome. Any other thoughts or questions? No?
Nope.
Nothing to say no.
Well, let me wish each and every one of you, live and on the recordings, a happy new year and the best of 2020 to all of you. Look for many wonderful things for the new year from us. We will be telling you about them actually on the next video that we do, which will be in the new year.
Mm-hmm.
So we will give you a list of all of the cool stuff that we're doing.
Yeah. It's another big year for us.
Yep. Even bigger than the last one. And this last one has been a wild ride.
Yeah, it really has, in a great way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have all made it possible.
Yes. I'm
So thank you.
Grateful. Yeah, thank you.
And we will wish you all good night.
Good night.
Night all.